more views, but I'll make sure to be on your
Yeah.
channel. So hi, Aya, how you doing?
Hi, Julia. I see you have a sparkly top like me.
I know, we ended up kind of having similar shirts. That's pretty neat.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know what my daughter would think about it, though. She has very good taste, so.
I like it. Actually, I think it looks very stylish. It's nice.
Well, good. Let's go ahead and share our links so that we can get as many viewers as possible.
Oh, yes. That's actually what I was getting ready to do right now. So I'm going to be sharing the main channel. It's not the secondary channel. I'm going to be sharing the link for there. If you want, you can go ahead and start sharing the topic while I'm doing that. So what was the topic that we were going to be discussing this morning?
Well, we're talking about language. We're talking about language-related things, but in this case, we're talking about bullying, bilingualism, and selective mutism. So that's a number of things that might or might not be related to each other. And I'm going to try to share this too. I have this idea that I could probably...
That maybe if we both share it, it gets more views. That's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, especially since I have this community tab on my other channel.
Oh, yes, you do. You know, I have it, I think, but I would have to see how it works for me. I'm not sure if it works until you have more than 1,000 subscribers, though. That's my curiosity.
I'm not sure. I think it's an experimental thing. Not everybody has it. It might not even have to do with how many subscribers that you have or don't have, but I don't have it on this channel. And I do have it on the other one.
Okay, that's interesting. So on this channel you have it, but not on the main one. Oh, I see. Okay.
No. I mean, it's the other way around. I had to go to the other, because this is not my main channel today. Right now, we're on my second.
Yeah, I'm on your second channel, actually trying to share it. That's the thing, like when I go in, it's just taking longer to share than what I would like. Like what I would like ideally, and I think maybe we can do this next time, that if we know, like there's a way you can pre-schedule the live stream where we have the link, and then I can have the exact link shared in advance. And I know there's a way to do that. I'm just going to have to test it out to see exactly how to do that.
I tried that one time, and what happened was I was supposed to tell them how many seconds, how many frames per second, and I did not know what to say.
Oh, okay. I can look and see again, because I thought that there was a way to do it, because it seemed like when I tried to schedule a live stream before, the link was the same, but as I said, I guess I'd have to test it out. So I went ahead and shared that to our main Facebook page right now.
Okay. Make sure that it's a global share, not just for our friends.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's see.
And I think I brought with me a club soda. I'm going to go get that.
Okay, sure. Okay, behaving. Okay, there we go. Now it should be public. All right, I'm ready whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. So you recommended to me a documentary. Was it called Finding Foucault? Is that?
Yeah, Foucault. I think that's how you say Finding Foucault. I believe that's how they pronounce it. The interesting thing about that documentary is the more you watch YouTube, they've said over the years that YouTube's trying to interpret what types of shows you like to watch, what types of content you enjoy, and that over time they will become better at recommending things that are similar to things you've watched previously. So I have watched videos about Japan. I actually follow there's this YouTuber couple that I follow and from Japan called Benny and June. And also after I watched the Selective Mutism documentary, that's when Finding Fuke was recommended to me. It has a couple of similar themes with language. It's a different type of story, of course.
Yeah.
It's about a Canadian woman when she was, I think, about 10. She was in Japan because her parents were working there. And they were also asked to go on the local television station since nobody really spoke English in that location, and they were considered the resident experts on learning the English language. But since there were no foreign language, like American schools in that area, like some people might send their kids to, which to me, I always found interesting that you're living in another country, but your kids have to go to school in your regular language. Like I always thought if you're living in that other country, wouldn't you want to immerse your kids in the culture of that country? But anyway,
here's the question. I mean, it's absolutely a wonderful question. If you do immerse your children, then are you also going to make them study their home language at the same time? So then they have to go to twice as much school, or do you just let them kind of learn whatever is taught in the language of where you live, and then have them be a little bit behind when they get home? So that's the question.
Okay, to me, like this is just my reaction. I think it's actually okay if you're living in that country to just, if you want, let the kids go to school in the language of that country, because why not experience that culture? Like, this is just my take. Like,
no, absolutely. That's what I did. I mean, that's what my parents did with me when I was, when we were living in the United States temporarily. The concern that somebody might have, and there was no problem with me, is that, say, after a year or two immersed in the local culture, the child might completely forget their home language, or even if they were speaking their home language at home, might not be as fluent at reading and writing because, you know, it's a completely different writing system. In my case, I was, it wasn't that my parents were teaching me how to read and write Hebrew at home all the time or anything like that, but I had already been able to read and write before first grade. Therefore, I already had the rudiments of literacy at hand. And so then when we returned to Israel in fourth grade, you know, my father, my grandfather actually tested to make sure. He brought out a Bible, made sure I could read. And after reading a few pages, he says, there's no problem. You can just go ahead and go to school. But you can imagine that in a different family with less literacy, that might be a problem.
It could be a problem, but just my interpretation of this is that I feel like in most cases it would be okay. Like, okay, you're going to go back to your home country eventually. The kids might, some children might be behind, but might not always. This is the just reaction I have, is that there are some families, like they're diplomats or they're just working in another country, and then their kids are going to an American school, and they might pick up like some French, but they barely pick up the language of the country where they're living. And I'm just, my thought is, do you ever really truly experience living in that country, or are you just in your little expat community and you're never really going out and learning things about other parts of that country where you're actually living? You're just like living in a bubble. Like there are American expat communities in Germany because, you know, with military, or just like diplomat expat communities. Do they ever like truly experience? Whereas with Fuke, I feel like it was kind of cool because they had to go to the Japanese language school. That was the only school available. And I feel like that girl ended up having more of a connection and meeting Fuke and basically having that friend that maybe an experience she might not have had if they had been living in a different part of Japan, like a bigger city where there may have been an American language school. So I kind of think it worked in her favor in that case.
Right, right.
So anyway, sorry, with Fuke, I just thought it was really interesting how she was very touched by that young girl and the friendship they had and their correspondence. And all those years later, like, she remembers Fuke and she wants to go back to Japan to find her. And the one thing that really touched her was just how Fuke was bullied, because Fuke stood out a little bit from standard Japanese society. And kids can be teased anywhere, but especially in Japan, if you're not conforming in some way in a certain community, you could be ostracized. I just found that angle of the documentary a little interesting.
Yeah, the truth of the matter is that that was the part of the documentary I was most curious about.
Maybe Fuke's lineage. I could never really find out much about it, by the way.
Yeah, no, and I was thinking of asking Jessica, the other girl, about this. She has her own YouTube channel, and so it occurred to me that I could ask her, but she was answering some questions, and in fact, she has a whole series of questions that she answered. And I noticed that when people were asking her things like, why was Fukue bullied? She got very defensive, so I don't want to upset her.
Oh, yeah, maybe she doesn't. This was another thought I got from it. Maybe she doesn't really completely know exactly beyond the fact that Fuke wasn't as affluent. But I think there could be something else going on, maybe culturally. Maybe she wasn't full Japanese. Like, I don't know. But
I have no idea. That's the sort of thing that I would be interested in finding out without being, in any way offending anybody about that. Just because I lived in 2 countries as a child. I got bullied in each of them, but under different circumstances. And so as a person who knows a little bit about bullying from that perspective, I was interested in understanding what was going on in Japan with that. But, somebody had said to her something like, to Jessica, someone had said, oh, Fukue is so pretty. Why did they bully her? And then Jessica, answering the questions, was very defensive. And she said, well, somebody can be pretty and bullied and blah, blah, blah. And really, I don't want to answer any questions about her.
Oh, yeah. In that case, I don't think that it would be prudent to pursue. But one thing I would just guess, just without knowing anything about Fukue's background, and I know she wants to be rather private because in the official documentary, she decided to be there in their meeting, but I guess she was offered more publicity. That was one thing Jessica talked about, and she didn't want to follow up on that. She wants to remain under the radar. So without knowing too much about her, but just knowing little bits about Japan, I do know that if you're not conforming within a certain community, because in Japan they do have classes, like there are working class communities or middle class communities or upper class communities. She may have just been ostracized for the fact that her family was living in this area, but she didn't conform to how other people were living. That was my main reaction to that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a mystery. If you watch the documentary, I mean, all you really find out is Jessica's view on it. You never get Fukue's view on what was going on with her. I mean, basically you get the Fukue is happy to meet Jessica again, to see her again. They're good friends, but Fukue is very private, doesn't really want to talk about what happened, doesn't want to talk about why she left elementary school, and I don't think that homeschooling was an ordinary thing in Japan at that time.
Actually, it's definitely not. We actually got a comment from our mature. He was saying that Japanese society is flawed, and in some ways that's true. They do have some issues, like you can't conform. I remember watching another documentary years ago when I was in teaching, by the way, where there was this boy. He was very brilliant, but he wouldn't do like the conformist school activities. Like he would get up and want to do something else. And they said that he was just a problem maker. Whereas in a different school environment, in a different culture, they might have been like, oh, he needs to be more challenged. So there is a conformist, like just to me, my reaction is if you're not conforming in some way in Japanese culture, they're probably like going to ostracize you a bit for whatever reason it could be.
Right. And I was talking to a friend, and the friend said, well, obviously, Fukue was somehow immersed in a situation of poverty, and that might be the reason. But in my experience as a child, you know, when I was a child, I'm not talking about things right now, but in my experience as a child, both in the United States and in Israel, children did not pick on, you know, bullies, and I'm talking about bullies. Mm-hmm. Bullies did not pick on other children because of what their parents did. They picked on other children because of something that they perceived in the child as being either a different behavior or a different appearance, or in some cases even, you know, how they were dressed. But
oh yeah, definitely. Like I was bullied as a kid, but I do know part of that was, okay, in the 80s, I was a girly girl and I wore 80s outfits that were from the Sears catalog or JCPenney's. And my mom's like, well, why are the kids bullying you? Like, this is stuff that's popular in the 80s, but I wasn't a tomboy. Like, I wore dresses and skirts. And there were a lot of girls that just wanted to wear jeans and flannels. And to this day, a lot of women have a problem with me because I just like to dress in more of a girly appearance. Like, even women. I've been bullied by other women for having long hair, for dressing more girly, like, or ostracized, I guess you could say, like, because I'm not a conformist in the way I dress. So I experienced that as a kid 100%.
Yeah. So yes, but I don't really think it's an exact mirror of the adult society so much. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times children are not even aware of issues of how much money anybody has. It usually isn't directly about that.
Oh no, like in my case, it wasn't even about money, I don't think, because I probably, like, I realized later on, my dad was making a lot more money than some people. Because I used to get harassed because I had a good lunch. Because I had food in my lunch. That was kind of weird, like, because my mom made me a nice lunch.
Yeah. Well, yes. And as a child, I was a child who brought lunch with me too. And I remember at one point, now this is just gentle teasing, and it wasn't really a bad thing at all. But this is back when I was 7 years old, and I wouldn't call that bullying, but I would bring a sandwich from home that had like bread and butter and green onions in it. And then I would have cookies that were, they had seeds in them.
Sesame seeds, right?
Well, sesame seeds or poppy seeds.
Oh, poppy seeds. Yeah, I remember the poppy seed one too, you were saying.
Yeah. So, and the kids said, how come you always bring grass sandwiches with sand cookies? Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was no big deal. I mean, it was very gentle and it didn't mean anything. Yeah. But anything that you do that is out of the ordinary, that's what people will pick out, and children will pick that out. And they don't know how much money you have. And yes, in my experience too, the worst bullies were the ones from the lower income families that were trying to elevate themselves. You know,
because of social status kind of thing. By the way, we did get another comment just from our moocher saying he was bullied in high school and how those memories can kind of affect you in a way, which I thought was a good comment.
Yeah. Yeah. Did he say how it affects them?
He didn't mention how, but he was just saying that when he was bullied, it brings back memories that kind of bothered him a little bit. But I just thought it was a good comment, and that we're actually getting some real comments today as opposed to some of the other things we usually get.
Good. Very good. Yeah. I think lots of people have experiences with bullying at different levels and at different times in their lives. Mm-hmm. But Yeah, I was just interested in what it was that made Fukue special at that time, because actually in the documentary, she was Jessica's only friend. So even though Jessica was not bullied, Jessica didn't have any other friends in that class, which tells you something too.
Yeah, it's because, well, Jessica's a foreigner. She's
Right.
not going to be conforming to Japanese society. And they might be curious about her because she has light colored hair, or it was her sister that did. But it seems like Fukui, she was more open minded. She would be someone that would, even though she may have been bullied, she had the capacity to befriend Jessica. So, you know, basically, I think that they kind of thought similarly, because remember there's that book where they wrote the same things for Halloween. Like they,
Yes.
yeah. So I think they thought, and there's something about life. I think even if there's like, if people are from different cultures, I think people that have similarities are drawn to each other. That was the beauty of the story to me, actually.
Yeah, their friendship was the best part of the story.
It was really good. And it turned out in the end, I thought Fukue's life seemed pretty good. Like she was married, she had kids, she seemed pretty happy.
Yeah.
Whereas Jessica seemed like, yeah, she has some, like she's doing well as a musician, but she seemed like she was kind of lost and sad a little bit more than Fukue. Like she was worried about Fukue, but it seemed like Fukue was actually doing okay.
Yes. Yeah. I think if you're an artist, it is harder to fit into society. So that's not unusual at all. But I agree with you. I also felt that way. That really there was nothing to worry about with Fukue. She was fine. She got everything under control. But that really Jessica was the one who needed that friendship the most.
Yeah, I think she wanted that affirmation. Oh, by the way, I want to make sure he did comment that dwelling back, he was just teased about just different things that he was teased about. No, what we're talking about is a Canadian woman. We're going to link to it in the video description. A Canadian woman that was in Japan 30 years ago. She's a musician, and she went back to Japan to look for her friend, Fukue. It was basically a documentary looking for Fukue is the name of the documentary.
Right. But what makes it interesting is that beyond the bullying, it's about bilingualism. I thought it was great that Jessica retained a lot of her Japanese. You could see her talking in Japanese. She says that she has like Japanese child language. And I don't know what she means exactly by child language, because by the time you're in fourth grade, you're pretty much speaking the same way as an adult.
Oh, I think I kind of get what she means. Like my best friend is well, I know what she means. My best friend is Vietnamese, and when we go to Little Saigon and she orders food, sometimes like the server, because they think she doesn't speak Vietnamese in a way that an adult should. Like she still speaks it in a childlike way. So I think what she meant was she felt like she needed an interpreter because maybe some of the nuances of the language are things she's not picking up on. That's the interpretation I got from her comment.
Yeah. Well, it could be because Japanese has a lot of honorifics, and if you don't use the right honorific, then you could be in trouble.
Oh yeah, that's true. I like that you know so much about Japan. It's really interesting. Like you can pick up on a lot. I know a few things, but I haven't studied. Did you visit Japan when you were in Taiwan?
No, I did not, and I have no knowledge whatsoever of Japanese other than what I've heard about it. So yeah, I would love to learn Japanese, and I understand that it's possible now to do so online. So there's this other YouTube channel that I sometimes watch. It's a young man who calls himself Hiding in My Room, and I told you about him. He learned Japanese online. First of all, from watching anime, and later also from talking to girls, because he was interested in Japanese girls. He was living in Britain. And eventually he did marry a Japanese woman and made his dream come true. And he's still talking about it on YouTube.
Oh, nice.
Recently, his father took ill, so that was the topic lately on his channel.
So we got a lot more good comments. Our moocher said that he looked for the or he had watched the documentary, so he knew what we were talking about. So that we're getting some really good comments today on the live stream.
Well, good. I'm so glad. I wonder if I could see them too. Do you think I could?
You could. What I do is I have the second window open, but I keep it muted so nobody can hear the echo. I just have to make sure I go in and mute it first. So anyway, so I think the overlying theme of that documentary was bullying and bilingualism, is what it seemed like to me.
Right. Yes. So what I wanted to add to that, though, is in my experience, and you can read the story, The Punky Wonkies, which is also available online, in which I incorporated some sort of biographical based, life-based experiences with bullying, both in Israel and in the United States. And my experience in Israel was I belonged to more like the in-group originally. Not that I was ever social or anything like that, but until I made a political statement, I basically made a speech in class. I was okay, and I was never bullied. On the other hand, there were other people who were bullied about their weight or something about their appearance. I always tried to be nice to those people. Went out of my way to do that. But as soon as I said something that got me into deep, hot water with the rest of the class, and so then I was open game. It was open season on me. It was exactly the person who was most bullied before who spit on me and behaved really badly to me. And
wow.
Yeah. So my experience tells me that a lot of times bullies are people who are not, the richest people or the people in the highest class, but they're the ones who didn't get the, maybe weren't taught how to behave when something like this is happening, or maybe they thought this was their chance to come out from under the bullying that they were under before.
Yeah, that's part of it. Or also there's just people, it doesn't really matter what social class you belong to. There are people that are rich that are treated like not so well just because they don't fit in with a certain group, or they might be quiet. Like there's many reasons. Like it has nothing to do with socioeconomic class, and a bully can definitely, like a lot of the rough and tumble bullies can definitely be from like impoverished families. It doesn't.
Right. So the second instance when I experienced that, I was in the United States. I wasn't being bullied for my political opinion. I was being a little more quiet about that. Okay, I can't be quiet about my political opinions.
You don't have to be. It's sad that we can't talk about
But I was a little more quiet because I was feeling a little less sure of myself. And I was actually bullied on the way to school for my height. Okay, which is ridiculous, right? But basically, you're not, you couldn't possibly be a fifth grader because you're too short.
Oh, gosh.
Anyway, I had to stand up to those bullies and ended up following them home. And that's when I found out they were poor. And all of it resolved itself and nothing really bad happened. But what I'm saying is, it never occurred to me anything. I didn't think about money at all. And I don't think they thought about money either. So I don't think people's, whether people are poor or rich really has anything to do with it. But sometimes you find out that those kids who maybe didn't have a chance to be taught, okay, you don't pick on other people because, are the ones who are more likely to have done it.
It could be. That's a good point, Aya. I was bullied, but it would always be for stupid reasons, I think. For having dark hair, being the only person with dark hair in my very Nordic German school upbringing. She has black hair, dark hair, just weird things like, what? It was the stupidest thing. You don't look like your family or your sisters. You must be adopted because my dad didn't come shopping with us. Like I literally had kids tease me for stupid things like that.
Right, exactly. And they know nothing really about your background, but they do know what you look like. So they're going to pick on something that they can see.
Yeah, just silly things. You know, I think like
Yeah.
you stand out a bit. And kids are, let's put it this way, they don't have a filter. They're not adults. They don't know that you can't just say anything that pops into your mind. So as an adult, I think one thing that helped me recover from bad memories of bullying was that you have to keep in mind these are kids. They're not going to have empathy, or they're not worried about anything they say that might hurt someone. They haven't been apprised to the, even if their parents have told them, well, you shouldn't say that, a kid is going to be much more honest than an adult.
Well, there's a difference between, honestly, I really think there's a difference between being honest and maybe saying something you shouldn't because you were honest.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And bullying, because those are not really the same things. You can make an honest observation that might hurt somebody's feelings, but it's not bullying until you repeat it over and over again, start throwing things at them and so on and so forth, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, once you start like taunting them, or like in Fukui's case where you make them like, you're just like, it looked like they were almost circling her in some of that footage, which was another thing that I thought was interesting, Aya, was that it seemed that they were filming that. I don't really understand, like, why were they filming situations like that? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I don't think the thing they filmed was an instance of bullying. That probably was a game.
Yeah, okay. So maybe it was just like for the drama and that.
Right, exactly. I don't think they did that. I don't think the adults just sat by and watched the bullying.
Yeah, it might have just been the way, like, maybe they were just at a school function and it looked that way. I have no context for that video. But anyway, it just kind of was like,
But you know, I don't think necessarily the bullying stops when you're an adult, because some of the things that have been happening in the news sound a lot like bullying. I don't know if you heard about that incident with the children from the Catholic school and their meeting with some Native American people and so on and so forth.
I saw it on social media, and I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't partake in a lot of it. Like I read some of the headlines, but I didn't really follow the story because
it felt as if the people in the media were actually bullying those boys. I'm not going to even say about the people on the ground, but okay. It sounded, I do think that bullying still takes place. I think that trolling, for instance, on social media, that's not limited just to kids. I think there are adults who are doing it too.
Oh, I'm sure it happens. I just didn't follow that story, so I can't really comment on it because I saw it posted, but I didn't read anything.
Yeah, okay, we don't have to talk about that. That's not on our agenda for today. Okay. So, yeah. So I think if we can skip over that particular documentary and then go on to the one about selective mutism.
Which I ended up liking a lot more, by the way. I thought that was more interesting and fascinating for a couple different reasons.
Yeah. So would you like to share your thoughts about that documentary?
Okay. I wouldn't say that I had selective mutism, but I can identify with a few things in that story, in that I didn't really speak until I was 4 years old. I have memories of people saying things to me. I remember, and now that my mom tells me about it, it's a memory from 1980 where I was running in a park and I fell and I hit my head on a sprinkler. Oh. And I heard people saying, "Oh my gosh, Julia, I had to go to the hospital and get stitches in my forehead." But apparently I didn't speak until I was 4 years old. So I have memories of things people said to me, and I can recite these back to my parents, and they can confirm that these events really did take place. But apparently I didn't talk until I was 4. My mom used to ask the pediatrician, and she was very worried about me because I wasn't speaking. Like I just wasn't saying anything. And then once I turned 4, I started speaking more. But even throughout school, I wasn't like Megan, where I wasn't completely not talking to anybody in class, but I didn't go out of my way all the time to talk to people. So I can kind of see, though, like where the line would be crossed, where if you felt uncomfortable in a certain situation speaking to someone, where you might withdraw completely. So I could kind of identify with Megan a little bit in the documentary. That was all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I had not been aware that there was a situation like that. Now, the situation of a child who starts to speak later, I was aware of. I had a friend in Israel who was a year younger than me. And so when I left Israel to go off to first grade in the United States, she was still not speaking, and she was like 5 years old. But there was nothing wrong with her. She was perfectly intelligent and grew up to be an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, when we returned from the United States and I was 8 and she was 7, not only was she speaking all the time, but she was also really good at math.
Oh, we'll see.
Yeah. It happens. So it happens that some people just don't start speaking, even though they might be very socially aware. She was the kind of person who could, she had a brother who was 2 years older than her, but who was much more shy and reserved, but did speak, you know, at the normal age. And there was a time when her brother came home and said, somebody stole my ball. And she went out there and she got his ball from some bigger boys. And she didn't use a word to do it. She just did it, you know, because she was so socially, you know, I wouldn't say aggressive, but she was socially aware, you know?
Yeah, she just knew that she could go get it. Actually, that was one of the themes in that book, The Wind in My Hair, where about the Iranian woman that's growing up. Like the women are taught, oh, you have to be submissive to men, but she didn't care. Like when her father was being bullied or harassed, she went outside and started like sticking her tongue at the boys. And her father was ashamed because she did that, but she's like, I'm trying to stick up for, like, she just knew that wasn't right. So she stuck her tongue out at them, even though she got in trouble for it later.
Right. Yeah. So first of all, one thing that I would like to make clear is if a child is not speaking, that does not mean the child is not intelligent.
Yeah,
if a child is not speaking, that doesn't mean the child doesn't comprehend what's going on or comprehend language or process language. And of course, it's not an example of selective mutism if they don't talk to anybody, which happens, you know. So selective mutism is this unusual situation where a child is developing normally and speaking and is fluent in his native language and possibly also in another language, and speaking to people that that child feels familiar with, like family and friends, and there's a certain level of intimacy. But then when thrown into a situation where the people feel like strangers, then he won't talk to those strangers. And of course, people can remain strangers after you have known them for a year, 2 years, 3 years, as long as you don't feel they're, you know, real friends or real family.
Oh, that's definitely true. I mean, even like recently, I had like an experience where I knew this person for years and years and years, and I thought like, well, I was getting to know them, but then I realized, no, I knew nothing about this person, but for many years, like I knew this person on a daily basis, well, almost a daily basis, but they weren't my friend. So
Right.
you can be schoolmates, classmates, work with people, and that doesn't mean that you necessarily are going to feel comfortable enough, like with Megan, to speak to them. Right. You might want to, but maybe you don't feel like maybe there's something holding her back, you know?
From the person who has selective mutism's perspective, it's not like they're making that decision. It actually feels to them sometimes as if their voice is cut off, and they couldn't speak even if they wanted to. And that's part of the the thing that's so hard for anybody on the outside to understand, even a mother or father or other family member. They might say, why are you not speaking? You need to speak, and not realize that the child actually feels as if she can't.
Well, when that one girl went to the convenience store and she wanted to buy the chocolate bar, and how she just shut down even though she was speaking, I almost felt like everybody wasn't understanding enough in that situation, that she was once again thrown into a situation where she just shut down, and they wanted to ask her, like, why did you shut down? It's just, I felt like maybe they should have given her a little bit more space after that.
Yeah, well, the thing is, from the outside, it just looks as though all the person needs to do is use skills they already have. You know, it's not like we're talking about somebody having to learn how to speak a new language or something like that. They already speak the language. So you say, well, okay, I realize you're feeling shy, but you know, why don't you just go ahead and do it? But from the perspective of that person, it's like they're paralyzed, or their vocal cords suddenly feel like they're paralyzed and they really can't.
That's true. By the way, we had another comment. I hope I'm saying this correctly. Their name is My Tahung's Obsession. He said he was 12 and he had selective mutism. I'm not sure if he's still here, but he just wanted to share that he identified with the topic of this video.
Yeah. So my experience with this, and in a way it still affects me because Bo is kind of like that. And I'd like to share with you something about Bo and Jessica, not Jessica from the Fukui thing, but Bo's Jessica.
Bo's Jessica, yes.
Because today, the reason I can be here during the day at Orchard House is Jessica is sitting with Bo, and they're getting to know each other much better. She's his sitter. And today I noticed there was some substance in Bo's little glass that he drinks from. So I asked Jessica about that. What was that? And she said, oh, Bo asked me for some coffee.
Oh.
And Bo does not usually drink coffee, and he never asks me for coffee. One time he tried to steal my coffee, but he never actually came out and said, hey, I'd like some coffee. So it's really great. It's a step in the right direction that he actually told Jessica he wanted to try some of her coffee.
Wow.
So, yeah, he spelled that out to her. And so she went, and, you know, she always comes in with her own coffee. I have coffee brewing in my house, but she doesn't take my coffee. And apparently her coffee has cream and sugar in it. Mine is just black. So she put some in his glass for him to drink because he asked for it. And he just sniffed it, and then he indicated that he wanted her to drink.
Wow, that's pretty big. Like, it seems like he's starting to communicate with language with Jessica.
Yes, a lot more. And what I wanted to tell you, though, is the only reason this is happening is he's feeling better and better with Jessica. And she has gone from being sort of a stranger to a person who comes by every week, but he only would display at or jump at or whatever, to somebody who goes inside, to somebody he can tell that he's worried about something. You know, he wrote risk to her, but at that time she had no idea what he meant when I was away for a week. But the thing is, one of the reasons it's so hard for me to prove that Bo has language is he would need to spell with somebody he doesn't know. That's
what he might not want to do that. Maybe he doesn't want to.
Or maybe he can't. Okay, because, you know, to say that he doesn't want to, it puts a really big burden on him. It's like he's being uncooperative, and, oh, you know, it's not quite like that. And the reason I know it's not quite like that is because Sword had that problem early on, and I had to learn to understand that. So Sword, well, you know, from about a month old, she was in Taiwan with us. She had a nanny from age 6 months. So she was speaking Chinese with the nanny. And,
pretty cool, yeah.
and she was speaking Hebrew with me. And then we moved back to the United States when she was 2 years old. And so she was just speaking Hebrew with me and heard English all around her, and then went to preschool at age 3. And the first few weeks of preschool, she had a friend from Taiwan going with her. And the friend from Taiwan left, and Sword was left there, and she felt like she had been abandoned among strangers. And she would not speak to people in the preschool, not the first year of preschool, not the second year of preschool, not the first year of kindergarten. And in first grade, she was still not speaking to people, but eventually within first grade, she started speaking to one person and then another person, and eventually got over it and was speaking to everybody. So it's a good story. It really happened. And while it was happening, I really didn't understand it at first, because I said, you know, she was speaking at home and she could speak English to people that she trusted. So it's not that she didn't know English, and she was practicing English at home all the time. But she just could not speak to her classmates or teacher.
She just felt unable to, like there's something that holds her back, like some sort of anxiety about speaking in certain situations where she doesn't feel comfortable.
Right. And the other thing, I guess this is kind of different from some of these kids, but it's very similar to Bo. I'll tell you another thing that she did. When she was in preschool, and she was really tiny, and she would not speak to anybody all day. And then when I came to take her home, she would take my hand and she would say, I want to talk to the teacher. And, you know, she'd had all day to talk to the teacher, to the kids. But I would say, okay, let's go talk to the teacher. So she'd hold my hand and she'd talk to the teacher, and she would say what it sounded like were like practice sentences. It wasn't really conversation, but she would go up to the teacher and say, I have a red dress. And it didn't matter whether she had a red dress or not, but she would say that. And the teacher would try to respond to that and say, oh, really? You have one at home hanging in the closet? You know, but it never really turned into a conversation, if you see what I'm saying.
I see what you're saying.
She was just practicing her English, and everything she said was in a good accent. It sounded like English. It was English. It was very grammatical. And, you know, we linguists tend to call sentences like that la plume de ma tante kind of sentences, you know, because when people are practicing French or some language that they learned in school, there are all these sentences that you would never even use those sentences.
Yes.
Or phrases, you know.
Like, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like in Spanish, they kept telling us to say, le voy a la playa, I'm going to the beach. And then we had this problem where they decided to change the Spanish curriculum, and they wanted us to start speaking to each other, but they had never really taught us how to speak Spanish properly. So they were becoming frustrated with us because we had that exact phenomenon.
Yeah. And so as a linguist, I thought I was seeing something that I'd never thought to see. And that was somebody using language, and a child using language, not in order to communicate, but in order to practice their grammar. And so this is really interesting because there are two schools of linguistics. There's the MIT school that I don't belong to, that makes grammar sound as though it's a machine. You know, there's a little, they believe, you know, and it's Noam Chomsky, if you've ever heard of him.
Yeah, I've heard of him. He's not the biggest fan.
Right. Okay. So his idea is it's all about the grammar. It's all about the syntax. We have a little device in our brain that puts sentences together, and there's universal grammar, even though every language has its own grammar, but somehow or other, it's all there. And it's very mechanistic and it doesn't make sense. And as a person who uses language, I never bought into that school. So when I went to study linguistics, I went into the other school of linguistics, which is the functionalist school.
Yeah, which sounds more realistic, honestly.
Okay, so that school of linguistics says there is no language acquisition device. We use language to communicate. We use our general intelligence and general data processing abilities in the brain to process language. And if you're exposed to a certain language as a child, then you will have native language proficiency. Okay. And so having been sort of brought up as a linguist in that school, I would never expect a child to be so hung up on grammar, especially since nobody, she didn't have any grammar lessons. Nobody gave her grammar lessons. When you're a child and you're learning language, nobody is telling you that even there is such a thing as grammar. And yet she was so aware of it. And she was thinking about it. And she was doing grammar exercises on her own. So my conclusion is that there is such a thing as grammar. It is independent of semantics and communication. And each of us has our own way of playing with it. And so anyway, that's one of the things that I learned from my daughter's experience.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's very intriguing. Wow. Thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, she did get over it. She's a very social person. She does talk to everybody. She is in college. She has a boyfriend. So everything is fine with her. And
she's doing really good, actually. I mean, isn't she also in that singing carol group? Don't they sing at events?
She was in choir. She's not currently in choir, but yeah, her major is psychology, and she does have musical training. She can sight read, but she's not currently in choir.
But to be able to do that, to go from being maybe selective mutism to later on, I mean, I think that's a big step. Wow, that's one of many things. She's doing very well.
Yeah, she's good at giving presentations. Doesn't necessarily like that, but she can do it. So yeah. So here's another question. Do you think that we need, that if a child does have selective mutism early on, do you think that they necessarily need a specialist? What do you think?
My opinion is no, because I felt like in the case of Megan, I felt like they should have just left Megan alone. Like, okay, I know she has selective mutism. I know the family wants her to speak when she gets to secondary school, but here's the thing. Megan seemed like she was bright enough. It seemed like she could make jokes on paper, like, stop copying me. She's just not speaking to everybody in class, and she gets along just fine. I felt like when they brought the experts in to like force the situation, to force her to start speaking at a certain point, I don't know. I just felt like it was a little overkill. Like, I'm not saying that not speaking is going to hold her back in life, but I felt like they were blowing it out of proportion a little bit in that case, because I think maybe eventually, like, she could have found a job even if she wasn't the most outgoing type of person. Like, just because she's not speaking all the time, I don't think it was going to hold her back as much as her parents. It seemed like her parents were more fixated on her social inability to interact with others than she was. And I felt like it was kind of making her feel bad in a way, like the pressure that they were putting on her. And I kind of was, I don't know, I didn't like it. That was just my reaction. Whereas the other girl, Red, I felt like her family wasn't quite as pressuring her. They just wanted her to have a relationship with the grandpa.
Right. It was all about the grandfather in Red's case. Yeah. Yes, I don't think a specialist is necessary. In most cases, it's totally unnecessary, and they probably will figure out a way out of it when they're ready, which is what happened with Sword.
And another thing about, well, Megan, I know she wasn't speaking, but she would nod and she would smile and she would acknowledge people. It wasn't like she wasn't using any form of communication. it just, she wasn't speaking to her peers and she wasn't speaking to the teacher. And I felt like the parents were just so frustrated by that. And to bring all those experts, and I'm not saying that they didn't help her, but I feel like they were kind of pushing her to speak in front of others before she was ready. And I guess it worked in her case, but not entirely, because they said some people still can't be reached because the documentary people ask her something and she's still not speaking. So I felt like they were trying to produce a result before she was ready. And I wonder if that could have repercussions. Like, that was just one of my questions.
Yeah. And I thought, I don't know whether you noticed, but when she did speak under those circumstances, when she was pressured to, her voice was very small. Did you notice?
I did notice that. Like, you could like, it was almost inaudible. You could barely hear her. Like, she would say yellow, like very quiet, or numbers like very, very quietly.
Yes, yes. And that was typical of Sword too. Now Sword, and you could see this on the teaser, because I included some of her talking. She had no need to be very quiet at all. It could be loud, could be very loud, within the family and with friends. But when she was in school, when she started to speak, or if she was really pressured by a teacher to speak, her voice was very small. You could hardly hear it, you know. And so I think that's typical of that situation. And what Sword reported to me was that she felt that she lost her voice. She just didn't have it under those circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, I feel like, well, and I don't even say I have selective mutism because I can speak to anybody, but I know in certain situations I end up speaking probably more quietly than I should. But other times my voice is louder. Like in some social situations, I don't feel as comfortable speaking loudly, whereas other people, they're okay with that. And as an adult, I've had to actually force myself to speak louder because I've been criticized in the past for my voice not being audible enough. That's why my voice is a little bit stronger now, because I was told at a young age, you need to speak louder in all situations. People can't hear you. Like, that was a criticism that I had.
Oh, well, I have that criticism all the time, but I think in my cases, I can hear myself too well through the bone structure in my head. So it would hurt me if I spoke too loudly. So sometimes other people, you know, in order to project for other people, I feel as if I'm yelling, you know?
No, I know what you're saying. And I don't, like, personally, I've never felt like people need to speak louder, or I'm not going to go tell them, oh, you speak too loudly. I kind of never liked that, where there's this societal expectation that you have to speak like at a certain pitch or like a certain volume. And I know, like, I do not have selective mutism, but one thing that has always just bothered me in conversation all my life is if people say you're speaking too fast or you're not speaking loud enough. It makes you kind of not want to speak. So I don't have the anxiety that the person with selective mutism has, but I can see why that would be daunting. Like when people kind of judge you all the time for how you speak.
Right. Yeah. And actually, I think people with selective mutism are very socially aware. It's not that they're not socially aware. They're so socially aware that they minute things about their voice and their social situation bother them that wouldn't bother somebody else.
Yeah, like they're actually more fine-tuned, because a lot of people, to be honest with you, they're not aware, or they don't care. They don't care if they're really loud. And I've noticed this a lot. Like a lot of people are very loud, but they don't care. Like they are louder. Like even if it's in a situation where it's not appropriate, they'll be louder, and they just don't, it doesn't bother them if somebody's offended by that. I'm seeing the other extreme of the spectrum.
Right. Yeah. There are those who are just in their own little world, and so they don't know what impression they're making on people. But actually, those with selective mutism are very socially aware, and they are aware of what you know, tiny things about their voice and their social situation. And
yeah, definitely.
yeah. So I think we've done this for about an hour,
Mm-hmm.
and we have not finished talking about this, but I think we better sign off. And the next time we talk, it will be at 8:45 my time. What time will it be yours?
It'll be 6:45 Pacific time, and then so your time it's 8:45 Central time, and my time it'll be 6:45 Pacific time. And then if you're in the Mountain time, which is like the Mountain States, it'll be 7:45. For the East Coast, it'll be 9:45.
Okay, very good. I think we have it covered. And it won't be on this channel. It will be on my other channel, just to keep people jumping.
Sure, yeah. So anyway, it was a very interesting conversation, and I look forward to continuing it. Thanks,
Okay.
Saya. Bye.
See you later, Julia.